Hey everyone, welcome to Neural Notes, show where AI comes alive. Smash that subscribe button and ride the innovation wave.
Welcome back to The Explainer. Have you ever stopped to think about how fast a thought is? I mean, really, really fast. Today, we're diving straight into the brain's electrical wiring to see exactly how it pulls off its incredible high-speed messaging.
I mean, how is that even possible? What's the secret sauce that lets a signal in your brain zip around at over 200 miles an hour to control your entire body? That's what we're going to break down.
Okay, so to get our heads around this, we first need to look at the message itself. And here's the thing. At its most basic level, it's not chemical, it's not mechanical, it's just pure, raw electricity.
Yeah, this electrical impulse, that's the fundamental language of your entire nervous system. You can think of it like the binary code in a computer, the ones and zeros. It's this super simple universal code that carries literally everything, every instruction, every sensation, every thought you have.
But wait a second, how does the brain even create one of these electrical messages? Well, that's where something called the action potential comes in. And trust me, this is the engine that drives this entire process.
So what is it? Basically, for just a tiny fraction of a second, the electrical charge inside a neuron completely flips on its head. I mean, the inside goes from being negative to suddenly being positive. And that right there, that super fast reversal, that is the nerve impulse. Okay, but this whole idea brings up a huge puzzle. Because you see, the neuron's outer wall, its membrane, is actually designed to do the exact opposite. Its whole job is to stop this kind of electrical flip from happening.
So, when a neuron is just sitting there, at rest, its membrane is like a fortress. It's this wall that's totally impassable to these little charged particles we call ions. Nothing's getting through. And because all those positively charged ions are stuck on the outside, you get this stable electrical difference between the inside and the outside. That's the neuron's default setting, its resting potential. It's like the quiet hum in the background before the real action starts.
So, you see the problem, right? It's a great question. If the wall is completely sealed, how on earth does an electrical signal, which, remember, is just a flow of these charged particles, ever get started? How does that charge flip if the gates are locked?
Well, the solution is it's so clever. The neuron doesn't smash down the wall. Instead, it uses these tiny, specialized little doors that are hidden right in the membrane itself.
And what are these doors? They're actually giant protein molecules. I mean, these things are huge. They're embedded right in the membrane, and they stretch all the way from the outside clear through to the inside. These proteins, they are the absolute key. There's a name for these amazing things, of course. Ion channels. You can think of them as the bouncers at the club door for the neuron. They're the ones who decide exactly when to let the ions in and when to keep them out.
So here's how they work, step by step. Normally, when the neuron is resting, the protein's shape keeps the channel totally blocked. But then, bam, an electrical signal arrives. That signal makes the whole protein molecule change its shape, which opens up a pathway. And as soon as that path is open, positive ions just flood into the cell. And that's it. That's the rapid charge reversal, the action potential we've been talking about.
Okay, so that explains the initial spark. But how does that spark travel, especially down a really long nerve fiber? You might be surprised, because the reality is probably not what you're picturing. A lot of people think that an ion gets in at one end and then just sprints all the way down the length of the neuron, like a tiny runner. But that's a total myth.
Nope, that's not what happens at all. The truth is, any single ion barely moves. It just takes a tiny hop across the membrane. But that little hop is enough to trigger the next gate down the line to open. And that one triggers the next one, and so on and so on. It's a domino effect. It's less like a runner and more like watching a wave go around a football stadium.
So here's the key takeaway. The charged particles themselves, they don't really travel. They just kind of shuffle back and forth. But that little shuffle is what creates this incredible traveling wave of energy. And that wave is what moves so far, so fast.
All right, let's tackle one last really cool idea. What is a neuron doing when it's not firing off a big important message? Does it just go completely silent? Does it just take a break?
You'd think so, right? But actually, no. A lot of our neurons have this constant, low-level hum of activity in the background. Even when there's no stimulus, no real reason to fire, they just keep sending out these little random impulses. And this isn't just useless static or noise. This is called baseline firing. And it turns out this default rate of firing is an absolutely critical and honestly a really clever part of how neurons talk to each other. See, having this baseline gives the neuron two ways to send a message, not just one. It can fire faster than its baseline to say something like, hey, I'm seeing the color red. But just as importantly, it can fire slower than its baseline to say something like, nope, this is definitely not red.
Just think about it for a second. If the baseline was 0, total silence, then a neuron could only ever send a message by firing more. It would only have one volume, louder. It could shout, but it could never whisper. It couldn't go quiet to make a point.
So this constant hum gives the neuron a much richer, more nuanced language to describe the world. Being able to slow down and say no is just as powerful, just as informative as speeding up to say yes. And that leaves us with this final, kind of mind-bending thought, doesn't it? It really makes you wonder about the incredible complexity hidden in our brains. What else is the brain saying, not in its bursts of activity, but in its moments of relative silence?